Hello, everyone. My name is Han Dong. I am the Instructional Technology Librarian at the University of Idaho Library. And thank you all for attending this library workshop on Introduction to Instructional Design. And throughout the whole session, if you have any questions about anything that I have talked about, feel free to post your questions in the chat. And throughout the session, I will be using Zoom polling to ask some knowledge check questions. And I will check the messages to make sure that I'm not missing any questions. So to get started, I'm going to first briefly mention that so on the library's main webpage, so we have some upcoming events that you may feel free to check out, some other, excuse me, some other workshop that you might find interesting. If you click the resource tab, you can see that we have over 60 workshops that other folks have done in the past. And this is where the resources for each workshop is being posted on. So for this workshop, so I created a website material, and so the session is being recorded. So when eventually the recording is finished and processed and uploaded to YouTube, this is where the final recording will appear to be at. So with that said, I'm going to click my website resource, and I will put it in the chat as well. As I mentioned, I'm the Instructional Technology Librarian. I have a master's degree in Instructional Technology. So I graduated last May, and I started this job like 2 weeks after I graduated. So I'm still relatively new to the campus. And instructional technology is the same as instructional design. So we tend to have a lot of different names for instructional design field. So you might see that there's educational technology, there's instructional design, instructional technology. These terms are all used interchangeably. So a lot of times they can mean the same thing. But in some cases, educational technology focuses more on K-12 education. Instructional technology focuses more on technology, and instructional design focuses more on the theory and application. We have so many different names. Has to do with that we borrow a lot from other fields, including education and psychology. So my degree is in Master of Science. Some other degrees, some other programs, they offer Master of Arts or Master of Education. So it just kind of varies. Today, we'll be talking about instructional design. So first, we will discuss what is instructional design and talk about a brief history of the field and what exactly do instructional designers do. Then we will talk about the different theories, including the learning theories, as well as the instructional design models. Then we'll be spending a lot of time to talk about ADDIE. So ADDIE is a generic framework for any instructional design process. And so we'll come back and talk about ADDIE, which is a acronym that stands for Analysis, Design, Development, Implementation, and Evaluation, which is really the core of all instructional design process. So first, what is instructional design? To put it in the simplest term, instructional design is about like designing instruction, designing some learning experiences and materials. So that can be like lectures, class activities, tests, papers, anything that can help learners to acquire and gain new knowledge and skills. And if we think about it, because if we just go take a look at like military hospital corporations, for example, there's always like new person coming in and they need to be trained on a specific set of skills. So instructional design can really have a pretty wide application in addition to higher education. Instructional design has several characteristics. So first, it is student-centered, as we put the students' learning goals first when designing instructions. So the learners and the performance, these are the focal points of all teaching and learning activities. It is also goal-oriented, as establishing well-defined project goals is central to the instructional design process. The focus is on meaningful performance and instructions. We're trying to use instructions to solve like authentic problems rather than simply like recalling information. And in schools, so grades will be one way to assess the student performance, but instructional design will focus on applying the classroom knowledge to real world setting. It assumes that the outcomes can be measured and in a reliable and valid way. This can be achieved as long as we create some valid and reliable assessment instruments. It is empirical, iterative, and self-correcting. We'll come back to this as when we talk about the instructional design process. This will become more clear. It is typically a team effort. The size of the team kind of depends on the size and the scope of the project, as well as the technical complexity. So if the project is large, it might be necessary to have a project manager to make sure that every team member completes their task on time. And last year, I was collaborating with several other librarians on creating new content for our English classes, English library instructions, and the whole project probably took us maybe 2 or 3 months. So it wasn't really a large project. So we didn't really need to have like a project manager. But how is instructional design different from like teaching, for instance? I think this is a diagram. I think really give us the perspective of how instruction is related to some other terms related to instruction. Really give us the context overview. So first we have education, which we use the term very broadly to describe all experiences in which people learn. And to give you an example, so say if I have never set foot in a kitchen and I'm ready to learn how to cook. So there are many different ways to go about doing that. I can choose to read some books. I can choose to just simply Google it, like Google, like cooking 101, cooking for beginners. So it can be hit and miss depending on which side I ended up landing on. And if there's like a specific dish I'm trying to learn how to cook, say if I'm trying to learn how to cook mom's spaghetti, I can choose just to call my mom and ask her for her recipe. So many of the experiences can take place outside of the school, and they can be unplanned, incidental, and informal. Next, we have instruction. So instruction is a more focused educational experiences. So I can choose to take a master class taught by Gordon Ramsay. And if I'm really serious about like learning the art and science of cooking, I can choose to go to a culinary school. And there are many different ways to deliver instruction. There's the instructor-led training. So a person in the front of the classroom delivering the instruction. It could be completely online. It could be hybrid. It could be computer-based training, mobile-based training, video-based training. So, but all sorts of instructions, they all fall under the bigger education category. Next, we have teaching. So teaching is in the cases where we have like learning experiences that are usually facilitated by a person rather than like videos, textbooks, computer programs. But not all teaching is considered to be instruction, as there might be occasions where like a teacher doesn't focus learning experiences toward any particular learning goal. So I might be taking a teaching class and the teacher might be saying something else I learned besides like cooking. So in that case, it may not be under the instruction category. And lastly, we have training. So training typically take place in the workplace where individuals, they need to acquire a very specific skills that they will apply almost immediately. And so a lot of times training take place in the form of instructor-led training, on-the-job training, peer mentoring. They may or may not be facilitated by a teacher. Next, let's take a look at the history of instructional design. So I found this visual timeline, which really gave us the perspective of different milestones that instructional design have gone through over the years. So in the 1940s, this is where instructional design started to gain more traction. When during World War II, we have several psychologists and education specialists that were asked to create some training materials for several thousands of soldiers. And instruction has been taking place for hundreds, if not thousands of years. But this was the first time that we have like so many people that needs to be trained in a such short amount of time. And how do we train them efficiently and effectively? So this is where instructional design come into play. I'm going to skip some of these because not everything is going to be important and we don't have time to go through everything. So in the 50s, so Benjamin Bloom develops the taxonomy of educational objectives, identifying the principal domains of learning. So today it is called the Bloom's taxonomy. In the 60s, Robert Gagne formulated 9 events of instruction. This is based on his research called the conditions of learning. And this work has some major influence on instructional design practice today. Then in the 90s, so we have more computer-based training delivered via CD-ROM that became a common method to deliver interactive training. In the 2000s, we saw more and more smartphones and tablets in the market. So mobile and social learning started to gain more traction. And the blended learning, which is a combination of in-person training and online learning, is used both in education and industry. So that was in 2010. 2015 and beyond. So today, instructional materials are much more like personalized, and targeted as well. And that is thanks to the big data and analytics. So today, the focus is not just on the learning outcomes, but also on the overall user experiences on the learner. So next, let's talk about instructional designers and what do they do. So I found this a helpful report, Instructional Designer in Higher Education. This was partially funded by Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. So go through some of the major summary of findings. So they survey at least 13,000 instructional designers in the United States. 87% of the respondents, they have master's degree, 32 have doctoral degree. A lot of time they struggle with collaborating with the faculty due to a lack of buy-in or lack of time or resources to devote to instructional design. So, and they have 4 major categories of responsibilities. I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. So first they design. So sometimes they design new content or redevelop old courses, especially if the old courses are like face-to-face instruction and now they need to repurpose it to an online learning course. Sometimes they author new content and they also act as the QA tester to make sure that the course meets the accessibility and the quality assurance standards. So there are many different standards that instructional designers use. And one of the many standards that they use, so if I skip ahead a little bit, so under the professional development resources page, one of the resource is called the Quality Matters. So if you go to QA resources on the rubrics, so if we take a look at the higher education rubric, so on the right-hand side tells you how to use this rubric, but you don't necessarily need to have a membership, which is going to cost you money. So on the higher education rubric, so this is a set of different standards related to many different categories, specifically on online or hybrid classes, courses that have like an online component. So for instance, so the instructors, they need to make sure to introduce themselves, and learners, they need to introduce themselves in the class. Those are very important in an online class as there's the separation between the learners and the teachers. And so we need to bridge that gap. So instructional designers sometimes go through the whole, they go through this list and then they go through every single content materials in the class, and then they assign points. The total points add up to 100. If they can score 85 or above, then that's considered meeting the accessibility criteria. Other things that instructional designers are responsible for, so they need to train new technologies On the instructors, they also teach pedagogy as well, in addition to professional development classes. Sometimes they manage projects, especially if they are working with different faculty members on many different classes and projects. They campaign for instructional design, advocating the value that we can bring to the students and faculty. They also work as the liaison between the different groups on campus. They also support face-to-face classes as well as online classes as well. So that's all the basics for instructional design. So now I'm going to launch my first poll. And so if everyone can take a minute to answer the poll, and I will check the chat to make sure that I'm not missing any questions. Okay, so most folks have answered the poll, so I'm going to end it and share the results. So the correct answer is all of the above. So a lot of the times, instructional designers, we are approached by clients, say that they tell us that, hey, they have a new training that needs to be developed, or they have an existing training that is not effective, needs to be optimized, or they have a training that's in one format, like a face-to-face. Now we need to convert it to like online. So the correct answer is all of the above. So now let's move on to learning theories. So once again, if you have any questions about anything that I'm talking about, feel free to post any questions you have in the chat. So learning theories. So learning theory is what guides the whole curriculum design process. And depending on who you are talking to, so if you are talking to an educational psychologist, they may tell you that there could be hundreds of different learning theories. But if you are talking to an instructional designer, these are the typically three learning theories that we accept in the instructional design field. So first we have behaviorism. So behaviorism defines learning as the acquisition of a new behavior or change in behavior. So the learning process begins with some stimulus from the environment. And then the learner reacts with some type of responses. And the new behavior can be repeated, so it becomes automatic. One good example of behaviorism would be the Pavlov's dog. So we have a dog with we give the dog some food and we ring the bell and dogs start to salivate. Eventually, when we take away the food, but we still ring the bell, the dog still salivate because of the stimulus triggered that caused the behavior to be automatic. But one criticism of behaviorism is that it doesn't really involve any creative thinking or problem solving. So the students, they might be like only be able to recall some basic facts or perform tasks and do not require that anything that takes initiative or to change or improve things. Some examples of behaviorism might include participation, bonus points, verbal reinforcement, and so on. Next, we have cognitivism. Cognitivism is based on the idea that the learner process the received information rather than simply responding to a stimulus. So the change in behavior are observed only when the learner plays an active role in seeking ways to understand the received information related to what they already know. Some examples of cognitivism learning theory are classifying information, discussions, problem solving, analogies, mnemonics, and so on. Lastly, we have constructivism, which is based on that learner construct their own vision of the world based on their individual experiences and knowledge. So since the learning process depends on how the individual interprets the meaning of their perceptions, experiences, and knowledge, so the learning is unique and different for each person. But one criticism is that the outcomes from constructivism are not always predictable because every learner has their own experiences and knowledge. Some examples of constructivism learning theory are research projects, problem-based learning, case studies, collaborative learning, group work, and so on. Next, we have ADDIE, which is a generic framework that help us to understand the whole instructional design process. So it is iterative that the results of the formative evaluation of each phase may lead the instructional designer back to the previous phase. So after analysis, they do formative evaluation back to design, then they go back to analysis, and same with from back to development, back to design. But at the same time, the end product of each phase is the starting product of the next phase. So the end product of analysis is design, which is the starting point of development. So that's why sometimes if you just like Google ADDIE, like sometimes you might see like a waterfall or like a more linear approach of these 5 different phases. And then all the other instructional design models are just variations of ADDIE. So if we take a look at some models, so including the Dick and Carey model. Okay, so first we need to conduct some identify instructional goals, conduct some instructional analysis, identify entry behaviors. Those are all part of the analysis in the ADDIE phase. And then when we develop tests, strategies, those are all part of the development phase. Evaluations is the same as evaluation phases in the ADDIE model. And here's the CAMP model, which so basically the idea is that there are 9 different tasks that the instructional designers can choose to engage with any of them, to start with any of them, or to proceed with all of the 9 tasks all at once. So we have learner characteristics, task analysis, objectives. Those are all part of the analysis and the design phase. When it comes to delivery, now is the development and the implementation phase. And then we do formative as well as summative evaluation towards the end. So, so that's the theories and models. So now I'm going to launch the second poll, and I'll give everyone a minute to answer, and I'll check the chat to make sure that I'm not missing any questions. Sorry, give me 1 second. Okay, so most folks have responded, so I'm going to end the poll. The correct answer is actually cognitivism. So because the students, they already studied the map, and now they need to like process some using using what they already know based on the knowledge and start some mental processing. That's why it's a example of cognitivism. Okay, so now let's talk about ADDIE. So ADDIE, there are 5 different phases. So we start with the analysis. So there are many different analyses that we conduct. The first is called the performance analysis. Sometimes is also called the front-end analysis. So we're trying to figure out like what the problem really is, what is the cause of the problem, and what is the solution, what solution are we trying to propose. So if we determine that the training was the problem, then we go through the whole instructional design process. Sometimes training may not necessarily the problem, then we solve the problem using some other means because there might be some other factors that is affecting the learners, such as social and emotional reasons. Maybe students, they know someone, maybe they say their roommates or their family member, they got COVID or some other reasons that cause stress and they are distracted. They are just not really, they're just not ready to learn. So those are some reasons. Attitude, are students, are they motivated to learn? I remember when I first started college many years ago that I was really excited that I can just take any classes that I want until I learned that I have to take certain classes to fulfill the general education requirement. And so one class I had to take was a biology class, as a science class with a lab component, which was required. So, and I didn't like biology, but whatever. I didn't really care about the class, but the instructors was really good, but I was just not motivated to learn. Environmental issues. So if the students, if they are taking classes remotely, if they are in their dorm or if they are at their off-campus housing, we want to make sure that they don't have like spotty internet or they don't have functional microphone that allow them to be able to participate and engage with the class. But if we do perform the performance analysis and we determine that training is this problem, then we are ready to begin the formal instructional design process. So the front-end analysis determined that the training was the solution to the problem, but it doesn't really tell us how to solve the training problem. So are we going to be creating like an instructor-led training? Is it going to be computer-based training, mobile-based learning? We don't know. So now we need to conduct a needs analysis, which is a combination of the learner analysis, context analysis, and the gap analysis. So learner analysis. So who are the learners? What is their level of education? What are their motivation? So the way how we approach like undergraduate students might be different from how we approach like graduate students who tend to be older, might be more mature. Some of them, they might be very busy with their life. They have to, like if they have like a, um, if they have like a job going on at the same time. So those are the things that we need to take into consideration of. Next is context analysis. So what kind of conditions will these learners be trained in? Are we going to be teaching them in a class? So what are those classroom like? What kind of technology is in there? Are we teaching them online? And what learning management system are we going to be using? Gap analysis. So what is the current and the desired state? So this is a gap that must be measurable and using some developed standard. So one example would be, say, 60% of the students scored an A in a research paper on a given topic. That's the actual status. And the desired status will be, we want 80% of the students to score an A. So the 20% is the gap that is quantifiable and measurable. And lastly, we have task analysis. So once we receive approval to move forward with our projects, so now we are ready for our task analysis. So this is where we organize the tasks into a high and low level knowledge and processes. So one example I attach here is how to make a PBJ sandwich. So this is a, excuse me, This is an example I use. So this was like a graduate level class assignment. So how do you make a PBJ sandwich? Seems to be pretty easy, but how do you like break down the task into like smaller, lower levels? So first, the way how I did it was to first you gather all the things you need to create to make this sandwich. Then I put peanut butter on one slice of the bread, and then I put jelly on the other slice. And so you have to go through all these steps to do that. And then lastly, you combine the two slices, and then there you go. There's your PBJ sandwich. So, and this is one example of task analysis. So after the analysis phase, now it's time to design our learning objective and how we are going to be assessing the objectives. How do we assess the students? So the taxonomy that a lot of instructional designers use is the Bloom's taxonomy. So Bloom categorized learning into these 6 different categories. So we have some lower level of learning, which is remembering and understanding things. And then we have like higher level creating, evaluating. And the idea is that the higher level is building upon the lower level. And when we are creating the objectives, we want to write them out by using some keywords in a way that is specific and measurable. So one example to write the objectives is to use the ABCD method. ABCD stands for audience, behavior, condition, and degree. So the example I give is that if I'm trying to assess whether my workshop is effective, so I want the participants to describe the different types of analysis. So this is what I wrote. So at the end of the workshop, so that's the condition, participants of the workshop, so they are my audience. They'll be able to describe the different types of analysis. So that's their behavior that we're trying to assess, and with 100% accuracy. So, so that's the degree of mastery that I'm looking for. So for a given instructional course, there might be many different tasks and many different objectives. And so we need to create at least one assessment for every single objective. And there are many different assessment strategies. You can like create tests, quizzes, discussion, group work, papers. So those are all good assessment strategies. And there are also different types of question types. So the one I use here is the fill in the blank. And you can also use like true and false, matching. What else? So those are some main ones, I think. Yeah. Okay, so instructional strategies. So instructional designers, we use strategies to ensure that the instruction engages learners through teaching and learning activities. And there are 3 main types of instructional strategies: organizational, delivery, and management. So we are going to be focusing on the organizational and delivery. So organizational strategies are used to organize the course, the lesson, the presentation. This is basically our outline. So one strategy that instructional designers use is the Garnier's 9 events for instruction. So these are the 9 events for a given course. So first, you want to capture the student's attention. So you could tell a story, you could show them a video, and then you let them know that this is what we are going to be learning today. And you want to make some connections with what they already know, maybe something that they learned in a previous class or maybe in a previous semester. And then you either give the lecture or show them PowerPoints, however you want to present the information. Then you want to provide some guidance and make sure to assign them some like homework to demonstrate their understanding of the content. And then you want to provide some feedback and assess their learning so that they know that there are things that they need to improve on. And lastly, we want to make sure that they can retain the knowledge and be able to transfer what they learned like outside of the classroom. So that is the Garnier's 9 events of instruction. When it comes to delivery strategy, this is how we are going to be delivering our content. So what instructional medium are we going to be using? So here we have John Keller's ARC model, which is based on his theories of motivation. So the ARC model is based on the premise that the individuals that are motivated to learn, if there is value in the knowledge that is presented to them. So ARC stands for attention, relevance, confidence, and satisfaction. So first, they need to seek. We want to attract their attention. You can do that by incorporating humor, like giving them specific examples, such as like a visual stimulus or some story. Then you want to let them know that this is going to be relevant for you, whether for today or for future use. Then to ensure that they can understand the likelihood for success, so provide them some feedback, give them control of how they want to learn. So one example in the online classes that we are asking students to introduce themselves, so we can give them many different options. So they can choose to write a paragraph about themselves, they can record a video of themselves talking, or they can like create a PowerPoint presentation. So that would be one example. Satisfaction, we want to make sure that the learning is rewarding and satisfying, but just make sure that don't over reward easy tasks. And a lot of times that may not work as well. So ARC model is really excellent if you are learners that are struggling with being motivated to be in the class. Problem-based learning is learning using some real authentic problems that have like application outside of the classroom. We have chunking, which is a very popular method when we are creating anything that is going to be online. So a lot of times if we think that face-to-face class, there might be like a 1 hour lecture, but if we just record the instructor giving the lecture and then post that 1 hour video online, that might not be very effective, as a lot of students, they might just lose focus after a couple minutes. So chunking is a good strategy. You can like chunk your content into like bite-size little sizes, smaller sizes for them to better to absorb. Gamification, some examples of gamifications include role-playing, research-oriented scavenger hunts, like adapting TV shows like Jeopardy, Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, and so on. There are a lot more instructional design strategies, and feel free to check out this resource as well. Next is the development phase. So now is the time to develop all the content that is required for our project, whether it's going to be a computer-based training, a web-based instruction, instructor-led course, a game, or simulation. This is where we are developing the things that we are going to be developed during the design phase. Instructional designers, they use Mayer's multimedia principle when they are creating like text, images, like audio and video, which these are a set of principles that help them to create content that is more effective. So we have a redundancy principle, which basically says that if you have like if you have audio narration, make sure to remove all those unnecessary text on the screen to reduce the information overload. And the same with the contiguity principle. So basically it's just placing the words next to the relevant graphics. So this is a graph identifying the different parts of the brain. And so this is another example how to do it. But if you label the different parts by A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and the students, they need to like go back to this little box. And so there's just a actual layer of the mental processing that they need to perform. There are also other strategies as well, but we won't have time to go through all of them, but feel free to check them out. So what softwares do they use to create instructional content? So these are the common softwares. I know that there might be some other softwares I'm missing. So for like images, some folks, they might use Canva, some might use GIMP, but these are the common ones that a lot of instructional designers use. So first we have authoring tools. So we have Articulate and the Captivate. These two are the industry standards authoring tools. So first we have Articulate. They have the 360 to create e-learning courses for LMS. And they also have Rise, which is a newer product that they just came out with a few years ago, which is really convenient as everything can be designed on a web browser. You don't necessarily need to like download extra softwares to be installed on your machine. Some features about Articulate. So anything you created in Articulate is going to be responsive. So it's going to look good on any size screens. So they have the content library 360. So you can source additional images from their content library. As a lot of times, if you are designing graphics from scratch, that can be very time consuming. And the same with the templates. So if you have templates, that can really cut down your overall development time. And they have some really cool interactivities. So this is like a wheel that learners, they can manipulate. And let's see. So here's like a drag and drop activity. So they can drag and drop the correct ingredients into this blender. So overall, it's just a very, very rich in media. And so overall creates a very fun experience for the learners. Then we have Captivate, which is a Adobe product. A lot of folks who have used Articulate and Captivate much prefer Articulate because Captivate can be a little bit buggy. And every time when you want to export it for mobile use or for some other tablet use, you have to like export a different file, which is very time consuming. For video creations, there's the Camtasia, which is really great for recording your screen. And you can choose to add narrations and really fantastic tool if you want to create some how-to tutorials. And I will be facilitating a library workshop on Camtasia in the fall. So stay tuned for that. We also have Premiere and Final Cut. Those two are the industry standards when it comes to video post-production. Both are very good. Audio, we have Audacity, which is an open source free software. A lot of folks use. A lot of times that is all you need. But if you have some files that requires a lot of like repair, sometimes you might have to use Audition. Document, everyone is familiar with Word, but Word is not very good if you have like a lot of images and the way how you manipulate the layout is can be difficult. So a lot of folks that use InDesign. For images, there's the Photoshop and Illustrator. So Photoshop is great for editing JPEGs and PNGs. And the Illustrator is really good to create like vector graphics, such as logos. All these softwares, besides the things listed under authoring, we have them installed on the machine in the studio. So for folks who are not familiar with the space, so among the libraries main web page under services, there's the studio. So we have a audio visual production room for any U of I students, faculty, and staff to use. This semester we are temporarily closed, but I manage the space. So if you have any use for the space, feel free to let me know, and I will give you access. And hopefully we can reopen the space next semester. Okay, so depending on the instructional purpose that you are trying to serve, so you might be creating different types of media and tools. So if you are just trying to explain something, maybe like a Word document might be sufficient. But if you want to show like changes over time, like animations, video simulations, those might work better for you. Okay. So after the development phase, so you develop everything you needed. So now is the time to deploy our project. So there are 3 main steps to follow. So first we have train the trainers. or train the instructors. A lot of times there's the train the trainers where we provide the instructor guide, which are just teaching notes for the instructors for them to go out and teach their classes, which is like a step-by-step process of what they need to teach, and this is how you teach it. If it's going to be online, we want to make sure that the instructors are familiar with the tools. So whether they are using Zoom or Team, they need to be familiar with the interface. Like if they need to facilitate like a group work, do they know how to create breakout rooms? So learners, we want to make sure that the learners they are proficient in using the programs. So if they are using Zoom, make sure that they know how to mute or unmute, which might seem simple, but for folks who have never used it before, we need to make sure that they know how to do that. So are they aware of the course goals and the schedule, like how many points will be awarded for the completion of the course tests, and what is a required passing grade? So we need to make sure that the learners know those things. And prepare the environment. So if it's going to be a face-to-face class, make sure that all the technology, classroom technology is going to be properly set up. So including like projectors, audios, and so on and so forth. If this class is going to be delivered online, we want to make sure that the learners, instructors, they have the equipment, including the computers and with headsets and microphones. Lastly, we have evaluation. This is the final phase of ADDIE. So there are two types of evaluation. We have formative evaluation is where we collect data and information during the development of the instruction to improve the overall effectiveness of the instruction. So we might be involving the end users through usability testing to show them a prototype version and observe how well they do and gather some feedback. There's also the summative evaluation, which is something we do at the very end. So we have external evaluators, they collect data to determine the overall effectiveness of the instruction. So they might be using like a course evaluation, interviews, questionnaires, observations, performance evaluations. So those are the different types of evaluation that they'll be doing. One popular model for summative evaluation is the Kirkpatrick 4 levels of evaluation. So these 4 levels are reaction, learning, behavior change, and performance. So on level 1, we are looking at what do the learners think about the training, the course, the instructor, like do they like it? So this might be the least important thing to evaluate because it doesn't really tell us whether the training was effective. So they could be really liking a class, and the reason why they like a class is because the instructor was really easy. So barely assign any work, everybody got an A. So everybody likes it, but wasn't as meaningful. And vice versa, if the instructor is really tough, like assign a lot of readings, tests, homework assignments, and students, they might complain, but they might still be learning a lot at the same time. Then we have level 2, which is assessing their learning. Like what do the learners know now that they didn't know before? So if they learned the content, then the course was effective overall. And lastly, we have the third, we have behavior change, so which is transfer of knowledge. So in what ways has performance on the job improved? Are the learners able to apply what was learned to their jobs? So we might be like observing behavior, analyze performance data, interview like employees, or distribute surveys to gather those data. And lastly, we have organizational performance, which is focused on the results for the organization. So how has the organization benefited? Has productivity increased? Have customer complaints being reduced? How much has the organization saved? So we might be looking at data such as like a retention rate or job placement rate. So that concludes the last phase of ADDIE. And so now I'm going to launch the final poll. Uh, so give me 1 second. Okay, there you go. And I'll check the chat to make sure that I'm not missing anything. Okay, most folks have responded, so I'm going to end the polling. Okay, so the correct answer is evaluation. So there are two forms. So one is formative, which is something we do during the whole design and development phase to make sure that the design, to improve the overall design quality, as well as summative evaluation, which is to make sure that the learners, they are learning what was required from them. Okay, so lastly, I just want to talk about some other resources that I gathered. So first is the teaching resources by CEDO. So they have conducted many different workshops over the last however many semesters. And if you feel free to check out these recordings and feel free to check out some other resources that put together. So under toolboxes, they have like other tools that you can use to incorporate in your instruction. They have resources related to course design, faculty development, and so on. And they have several instructional designers on site. So if you have any questions about online teaching and learning, and so feel free to ask those folks. Next, we have resources related to online teaching and learning. So we have some books, either from our library or through our Summit resource sharing consortium. There's the Trends and Issues, which is a podcast, which I really liked. So they have the hosts are two instructional design faculty members. So they get together every 2 weeks and talk about some recent trends and issues in instructional design. They also recommend some readings. So feel free to check those out as well. And all those readings are recommended by them. They are very recent, published in the last 2 weeks. Feel free to check out their podcasts on your favorite podcasting app. We have a couple resources related to training, just in case that is something that folks are interested in, and professional organizations. So we have Online Learning Consortium, which provides some resources on online teaching and learning. Association for Talent Development is more related to like industry training. And Association for Educational Communication and Technology focuses on educational technology. A lot of times these organizations, they are now free. So if you want to join their membership, you have to pay, but I don't think it's really necessary. What I like to do is to go to their recommended resources to check out if they have anything that could be useful. So for AECT, for instance, they recommended several journals, some of which are open access, so you might be able to read for free. So there are books online that you can check out. They have webinars that they have conducted in the past. Check out those recordings as well. Under portals and databases, so here's the resources on University Curriculum Directory. So if you are interested, or if you know someone who's interested in getting a degree in instructional design, and feel free to filter by state. And a lot of these programs, they like offer like different degrees and in different names, but they're all instructional design related. And a lot of times they are like offer some online classes. So you don't necessarily need to travel to attend their program. That's pretty much all I have for today. So before we conclude, I do want to mention that there is a post-instruction survey that I recommend everyone to fill out. This is completely optional and anonymous. So if you are interested in providing me some feedback on things you learned, things that you don't find as helpful, or things that you feel like I could improve on to become a better workshop facilitator, feel free to let me know. So I will also put this in the chat. I will close this survey this Friday. So if you don't have the chance to get it today, to get it completed today, feel free to come back to this. So with that said, if I don't receive any other questions, I want to thank you all for coming to this workshop, and I really appreciate your time. Let me know if you have any questions. Feel free to contact me about instructional design. So thank you all, and have a great rest of your day.